You'll all have to kind of gather around. There's three pictures here that really belong together. This picture, that picture, and that picture. And I'll tell you what, they're all at Santa Barbara, California in 1955, Labor Day, which was my first race ever. Jimmy couldn't race because Warner's wouldn't let him. But he felt compelled to mother me through my first race weekend. So this is in between races, and we are visiting, just wandering down the pits, which Jimmy loved to do. And we visited Dale Johnson, another Porsche driver, in his pit space. Jimmy is talking to Dale's wife. I'm right next to Jimmy, but I'm looking down at Dale's Porsche engine. That's Santa Barbara, 1955. Here, this picture here is Jimmy running down the pits to the track so he can look for me, see if I've survived. And this is Jimmy reaching the track and looking down the court, down the straightaway for me.
How cool.
So that's the backstory behind those three pictures. They're all about one thing. My first race, Jimmy, as you can tell, more anxious than I am, than I was. And there that's the home straight, and the home straight came off of a very sharp turn. He's looking to see if I've survived. There's a worried anxious look on his face if you look at the picture.
Yeah.
Just like a mother hen. Now over here, right behind you, are most of this stuff, the letters, and over here, I took this off of Jimmy's desk on October 2nd, 2 days after the accident. And I put it all in a box and kept it. I told Marcus Winslow Sr. that I had it, and what would he like me to do with it? And he said, keep it. And I kept it for 40 some odd years, and then gave it to Marcus to put in the museum. And so that's the story behind particularly these personal letters and stuff like that. The stuff that came from Warner's came from Warner's.
But the personal letters are from Pure.
Pardon?
Those personal letters, they're from Pure.
Personal letters, yes, are from Pier. They had to come by way of Philadelphia because of her mother. There was a whole charade they went through. And I'm very interested that Marcus put the letter, one of the letters out, because for years he wasn't going to put them out. They were in the back. But I see he put at least one out, part of one out.
Can I ask a question? How did you do in the race?
It was not memorable. That's a whole other story. It's in my book. On that last turn, on the last lap, I got hit from behind by a guy that didn't know what he was doing. Jimmy and I went through a whole charade so that my folks wouldn't see the damage. And then we took it and had it repaired. But what we did when we got back to my house from that race weekend, I parked the car so they wouldn't see. Now, this was our whole scheme. We parked the car in the garage, so it was a two-car garage, so that they couldn't see the damage on the right side. Because my dad would always pull into the left. And then we got it out of there and got it fixed. Like two guys, in trouble.
Do you remember the conversation when Jimmy caught up with you at the racetrack? Anything you can share about that? His
No,
comments about your...
so what happened, I told him, he said, it was a minor thing, basically, and I certainly didn't expect to win the first race. Mainly a question of getting through it, so, and it would have been fine, except for this one guy, a Triumph TR3, I'll never forget him. And we just went on from there.
Excellent, thanks.
I mean, it's unfortunate that we had no idea Jimmy had 3 weeks to live. I mean, that's basically, it was about 3 weeks. This was the first, second, and third of September, 1955.
Lew, do you have any story? Did he ever talk about that Oscar? Like he gave to Bob Hinkle? Did he ever say where that came from?
I have no idea what this is about.
Okay.
Jimmy never
He
received it.
compartmentalized certain
Jimmy
things.
never received an Oscar.
I know, but
No, I know, but he got that somehow, and he gave that to Bob Hinkle.
Well,
It has to do with Mila Nurmi.
Really?
Yeah. Jack Simmons.
Someone stole it.
I tell you, Kip, if he got this posthumously,
No.
that would
He
be
got one possibly,
something.
but not that one.
I have no idea where he, maybe Bob Hinkle got his hands on it.
Well, he gave it to Bob Hinkle. So
Who gave
Jimmy, he got it first. Somebody gave it to him in a bag. Yeah.
Then it was stolen.
Yes.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
This, the bongos and the bullfight paraphernalia were, where Jimmy lived the last few months of his life. It was like a hunting lodge. It had a loft, had a big front room and a loft, and that's where the bed was. And it had a little kitchen, which I never saw Jimmy even boil water. And downstairs was a little den kind of thing. This stuff was in the den, totally ignored. That phase was over. That was a New York thing, bongos and bullfights. I mean, Tijuana was 2 hours away. He never even went in that direction to a bullfight. So it was down there as decoration, but it wasn't in his life anymore. Yeah, the Villa Capri. All right. Anyone who knows anything about Jimmy knows that that was the hangout. It was a small Italian restaurant just north of Hollywood Boulevard, near on McCadden, which is a block from Highland Avenue, a main thoroughfare. And it was much more than a restaurant. It was a hangout for Sinatra and his crew, Sammy Davis Jr., etc. Hollywood songwriters, big name songwriters hung out there. It was like a club. It was a sanctuary. Couldn't take pictures in there. No autographs. They couldn't be. They weren't bothered. They weren't allowed to be bothered. And Jimmy had a booth, more or less, that he always went to. Sinatra always had a booth that he went to on opposite sides of the room. And we would always enter through the kitchen. Don't ask me why, because Jimmy started that. We always entered through the kitchen, off the parking lot. They had I called him a wild Italian chef, Carmine, and we'd go in there and say hello and sample a few hors d'oeuvres and come into the main restaurant, which was small. It wasn't a big place, and but full of celebrities. But there was no table hopping. They didn't even hardly talk to each other. I mean, Sinatra had his booth, and whoever, mostly Jimmy and I were alone, but that was where we were. And Jimmy Van Heusen, a big songwriter, he had a booth that he always was in. Sinatra here, Jimmy here, the Van Heusen booth was here. It was like an unspoken rule or rules in there, and there were tourists, but they they didn't put them in the booths. They put them at a table, and for some reason, I don't know how or why, but there were no they didn't take pictures and they didn't ask for autographs. My friendship with Jimmy went from when nobody knew who he was to being the hottest star in Hollywood. And he never changed one iota in our friendship. Jimmy didn't change. He didn't get a big head. He didn't even pay attention, really. What he was always concentrating on was his craft, not all the ancillary things that go. He kept wanting to find ways to improve. And in 18 months, and I was with him plenty, not one person ever asked for an autograph. He came and went, we came and went, did what we did, never bothered by anyone. And we used to go, at that time, LA and Hollywood had live music all over the place. And Jimmy and I both really liked jazz, and we would drop into a bar and just listen to some live jazz. No one ever asked for an autograph. No one bothered us or him. And even when East of Eden came out, and he was, acknowledged as a big star, and then in the midsummer, Rebel came out, and I'm not saying that it would have continued that way, but that's the way it was up until September 30th, 1955.
It says 3 days before his death.
Well, that could be. I mean, I was in there with him the night before, so it's very possible. There's a story behind this racing suit. I saw Jimmy in this racing suit. He had been driving in his 3 races before Warner's clamped down on him. Just a white t-shirt and ducks. But then he bought a black racing suit. And that really struck me as being very dramatic. And so when I became a leading driver, I wanted a black helmet and a black suit and a black car. When Porsche wanted me to drive for them, to drive the Carrera, which they were just coming out with, and they were putting this car together at the factory for me, we had a meeting in Hollywood. 2 bigwigs came over, and we're talking, and then I say, now, I wanted British carburetors because they were they were more efficient than the German carburetors that they were putting on the Carrera. No problem. And I said I wanted this or that, no problem. Then I said the car has to be black. And Porsche said, we do white and red. That German response. We do white and red, period. Well, make a long story short, I got my way. I raced black Porsche Carrera with white stripes. And that was the first black Porsche ever produced. And now it's the most popular color. Along with Audi, which was the sister company. And they know it. In 2011, I was in Monterey, California, being honored by a big Porsche get-together. They sent cars over from the museum, and there were 3,000 Porsches from collectors all over the country. And Porsche was honoring 5 drivers, putting them in their Hall of Fame, who contributed the most to the Porsche mark in the 50s through 1965. And, I was one of them. And Freddie Porsche III, the great-grandson of Dr. Porsche, and chairman emeritus of their board of directors, was there. And he was introduced to me. This is Lou Bracker. And the first words out of his mouth were, "Ah, the black Porsche." They know. They knew, and they know. And I thought that was...
And he said the chassis number. Oh, the black Porsche chassis number, blah, 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 blah. So I didn't know, Dad, that it came from the black suit. That's what inspired
This
it?
all
That Jimmy's
came
suit?
from the black suit.
I didn't know
Yes.
Nice.
that. Do you
I
want to
saw
talk?
Jimmy in that, and that, my sense of the dramatic, whatever, I said, you know, I didn't do it in his honor. I did it for me. I did it because I thought every car out there is red, white, British racing green, Ferrari red, no black car. Now, I raced under 113. Jimmy raced under 130. The story behind that, we both we thought the same. We wanted 13. And the 2 big racing organizations wouldn't issue 13 to anyone. They were superstitious, we weren't. And so I got 113 and Jimmy got 130. That's as close as we could get. That's the story behind those numbers.
Is there a photo here of the white Speedster you bought that was Jimmy's? Is
What?
there a photo of the white Speedster you bought that was Jimmy's, the one he sold for the Spider?
Well, that's the white Speedster right there. And that's Jimmy's first Porsche, which ended up being my Porsche. When he bought the Spider, I traded in my Porsche and got this Porsche, bought his. And this is, you can see Jimmy turning to black as his color. But he didn't start out that way. But that's the suit that started it all for me. And I don't know if there's any questions, of course, I'd be happy to answer them.
What kind of guys were you going up against in your racing? Jimmy and you were really
Oh, we
young.
we were racing good ones.
I would say. Men in
We
their
were
40s
racing-
and 50s, would you say?
Pardon?
Men in their 40s and 50s?
No.
No, not that old?
At the beginning, you could drive your car to a race and race it. But by 1956, I was racing against really good drivers, factory drivers, and you wouldn't recognize their names, but guys like Richie Ginther and Ken Miles, Dan Gurney. I mean, these were being paid to drive. Some hired by the marks as mechanics or whatever they wanted to call them, and because in those days, what the cars did on the sports car circuit is what sold cars, and it wasn't TV, it was Porsche winning on the track that pushed Porsche, and Ferrari. Nobody even knew what a Ferrari was until it was sports car racing, and so it was all about economics. They wanted the best drivers. They produced special car. By that I mean they put together at the factory by hand, and to them it was a business. To us it was a ball. There's a big difference.
Can you explain a little bit about your relationship with Wolf Rutherwick? Did you have any kind of relationship with him?
I don't think anybody had a kind of relationship with Ralph. Rutherwick couldn't speak English. He didn't speak a word of English. And so, you'd might try to talk to him about the car, but see, Rutherwick was not my mechanic, not the factory mechanic involved with me, because that accident had already occurred. Porsche had sent over another factory mechanic who spoke English. That was who I did all my discussion with. The car was kept at Von Neumann's Competition Motors garage in between races.
What was the name of your mechanic?
Oh, God, I don't know. Okay, this is Jimmy's sense of humor. And you'll recall the picture of Jimmy in the casket. That was his cynical sense of humor. That gave birth to the death wish nonsense that the media took hold of. Jimmy did not have a death wish, he had a life wish. But it was pictures like this that reporters and others, he had this death wish this death premonition. Nonsense, total nonsense. We had so many plans for the future, and Jimmy loved practical jokes. And this is just a practical joke for him.
How did you hear that he had died? How did you hear that he had died?
Well, that's a long story. The reason I wasn't with him on the way to Salinas is because I'm a big SC football fan, and I wanted to go to the football game. That Friday night, it was Texas SC, and even though Jimmy kept calling me and telling me, you know, I need you to go to Salinas, and I said, Jimmy, I'm going to the football game. And he I think that's was another strong thread in our relationship. I did what I was, I had my own life. I did what I wanted to do. And my friends were my friends, even if Jimmy had falling outs with him, like with Lenny Rosenman and Dick Davalos. That's his problem, not my problem. And he respected that. And he never said a untoward word about either one of them in front of me. Whatever his problem was, stayed there. I didn't affect my friendship with Dennis Stock, Lenny Rosenman, whatever. And so I didn't get out of the game. And don't forget, the Porsche didn't have a radio. In those days, the Speedster didn't have a radio. And I just decided to stop by the Villa Capri on my way home, because I could take a route to bypass it or go right by it. And that's where they told me about Jimmy. And I describe all that in the book. It was, a very hard period to write about, and I could only write about it like 10-minute segments and just get away from the computer because I was revisiting. When I wrote the book, I was revisiting the whole 18 months for the first time. I had locked it away, and I was like an observer. In other words, it happened to someone somewhere sometime. And and I knew that would happen, and that's why I swore I'd never write the book. And because it was very, very personal. And so I started writing the book, and I wrote it chronologically. And it was no problem for me to write through, Pierre Angeli, but that was Jimmy's heartbreak, not mine, and things like that. But then when I got to September, beyond my first race, and towards the end of September and the accident, then it became very emotional, very tough, and I had to get up and walk away from the computer. And I kept telling myself, I don't want to rush this, so I have to leave it and come back. And I actually came back like in 10-minute segments. And I'd write a few paragraphs, and then I'd have to leave again. So, and that was 60 years later, and, or 55, whatever it was. And, but it was so fresh to me because I opened that compartment and everything came tumbling out. And also, not only the feelings, the raw feelings, but perspective came tumbling out. And I think I was realizing while I was writing that part, you know, what I'd really lost. And that's why I didn't want to write the book. And I only wrote the book because my daughters wanted it. I didn't write it thinking it'd ever be published. I didn't care. Didn't make any difference. And I didn't even know if it would be readable. But I simply wrote what happened, what I felt. I was conveying to myself more than anybody else. And saying, well, it's a catharsis. I'm taking a good look at this and examining everything, including my feelings. And so there were times when my feelings said, you can't do this, you have to get out of here.
Kind of like a healing experience.
Pardon?
Partially a healing experience for you.
I'm glad I did it.
I
It was a healing experience because now I can talk about it.
Yeah.
See, I can talk. I couldn't do this before the book. I couldn't take you through backstories or things that we did. I just couldn't do it. That happened to somebody else. I'd locked that up tight.
Yeah.
The good, that was the really major good that came out of it. The other thing, major good that came out of it is when I did unlock it, it was all so fresh.
Wow.
Like it just happened. And I remembered everything, conversations and events, and then for the first time, examining my feelings through all of this. And when I talk tomorrow at the memorial, that's part of my address. Is I'm going to talk about me somewhat, but the me of 1954 and 55. What was I thinking? What was I doing with Jimmy? And and the things he put me through. By that I mean, not him putting me through personally, but having me at meetings and so forth without preamble, no explanation. And so what was I thinking? What was I thinking the night we sat and had dinner with Alec Guinness? You know, I've never really discussed that. I discussed it from Jimmy's standpoint.
You were there.
But that's the big thing, I was there. And so, you know, that's fine. The book was much more important than a book, to me, personally.
And on that note, he'll be out on the porch signing books, and they have this for sale here.
Thank you.
Because the parade's gonna
I'll
start
say one
soon,
thing
so-
about the book. Every word in it is true. I wrote every single word. Nobody was allowed to put anything in or take anything out. And I wrote what I knew, nothing manufactured. I didn't have to put a filler in anywhere. There was enough. There was enough there.
Thank you for writing the book, Lew.
Thank you.
Out there.